I didn't mean to press the button, but it is what it is. So now let's talk about the halachic parts of the Pesach Seder. This is, of course, an interesting year, different than other years, because the Seder is Saturday night. And so that means a few things are different this year when it comes to observing Passover and observing the Shabbat, the Shabbos, the Sabbath, which is the eve of the Passover. And actually, in the temple times, they would actually slaughter the lamb on the Sabbath. So the first thing is, the fast of the firstborn is Thursday, or we make a siyum on Thursday. The second thing is we search for the chametz Thursday night, and we recite the Kol Chamir of the night one at that time. I'm not going to translate everything. I'm going to assume that people are familiar with some of the liturgy. And then in the morning, at the traditional time, Friday morning, we burn the chametz, but we do not recite Kol Chamira. But if you want to recite the Yehiratzon, that you may recite. Then Shabbos, all the food should be Passover food, with the possible exception of eating challah. The reason for this is as follows. We cannot eat matzah on the eve of the Passover because the Jerusalem Talmud says that we're not allowed to do so. It's like it's compared to a man sleeping with his wife, with his bride, the night before the wedding night, and not waiting. I know Rabbi Weinberg used to tell us that there was a Moscow who learned in yeshiva, and he said he tried both. He was boiler rusas and beis chamiv, and he also ate a matzah of Pesach, and he didn't see that it was exactly the same. Obviously, it's not what it's meant, and it was also not meant for him to try either of those things. They're both forbidden. But this person was, he lost out on that level of spirituality. It's very sad. But that's what you mean by a heretic. Someone like that, that's a mumar lahachis. That's a real heretic anyway. Because he knows better, right? You can't say that he's and it didn't seem like it was l'teyavon, right? Because was it really l'teyavon? And maybe because also the boiler rusas of beis chamiv was not really l'teyavon. You can't wait one more day, but so the same issue both times. In any event, moving along a bit. So what else we want to talk about here? So what we have to do, we have to eat the Sabbath meals. So what's generally done is as follows, although by the daytime there's different ways to do it, and in general there are different ways to do it. The way in my house what we do is we have these small rolls, bread rolls, challah rolls, or chametz, and so Friday night and Shabbos morning we eat rolls before the meal. If we can go out on the deck and eat it outside, it's the best way to do it. So we go, we eat, we wash, we make a motzi, we eat the roll, and then we eat the rest of the meal, which is already set for Passover. Then we meaning it's all Pesach food. Then in the morning we have to wake up very early, So you have to finish eating chametz before something like 10 in the morning. So we pray at like 6:30 in the morning instead of like 9 in the morning. And we say all the prayers quickly. We don't sing anything. We just get through it. And then we eat the first meal. Then we wait like a half hour. We eat the second meal, meaning let's say the first meal you wash, you eat some fish, and maybe you have the way Satmarov would do it is you would eat fish and the eggs, and then you bench, and you wait a little while, and then you wash again, you eat bread, and then you eat fish again, you eat the cholent, kugel, whatever. Chavos Yair says, well, first of all, Chavos Yair doesn't have this thing of washing twice in the morning, and the other thing is that he says you don't eat cholent or kugel on this Shabbos, but you could have a potato kugel, you could have a potato cholent, just don't have chametz. Technically, you could have beans and whatever also, but it's just easier this way that we don't have any of this. And then so you fulfilled shalosh shudas, but there's a problem because there's an opinion that you cannot have shalosh shudas in the morning. You have to have it in the afternoon. So then the second meal, the third meal, the shalosh shudas meal, you eat it in the afternoon. Just you have some fish or you have some potato kugel. I think is what Satmarov used to have. And Chavos Yair mentions being kaveh sudal yayin, so maybe you have a cup of grape juice or something. And you sing this mirrors, you say a drasha, because also there's an opinion that saying a Dvar Torah counts for shalosh shudas. Well, like the Brisker Rav says, you could upshlug the Dvar Torah, but you can't upshlug that you ate something. So you should eat something, and that's why you fulfilled all the different opinions. Technically, if you don't want to wash in the morning a second time, or you don't have time, you could really just, like we said, wash once and have the third meal shalosh shudas without washing. But if you want to, and then there's other opinions that you could have egg matzah, but it has matzah shira, which is not chametz, but it's also not something you could make the seder with. You can't eat that for the seder matzah, and so that's another thing that people will eat in the on this Shabbos. And then people make a big deal like it's so difficult. It's really not that difficult. And then you have the Seder, and you cannot start preparing for the Seder until Shabbos is over, unless obviously you can prepare things before Shabbos for the Seder, but you cannot prepare anything while it's still Shabbos for the Seder. So that's just something, obviously, to have in mind. You should have a pre-existing flame to light the Yontiv candles, which would include, you put two candles together to make Havdalah. It's what we call Yak Nahaz, which stands for Yayin. You make the Bracha B'rei Pirgafen. Kiddush is the K, the Kuf. Then Ner, you make the Bracha B'rei Ba'orei Ha'esh, and then Havdalah, you make the Havdalah bracha, which ends, instead of Hamavdil bein Kodesh l'chol, Hamavdil bein Kodesh l'kodesh. It's all in the Haggadah, how to say it, and then after that is when you recite the Shechianu. So that's what we mean, Yak Nahaz. And so what a lot of people do is they'll put two candles together. There's a custom to have very long taper candles by the Seder anyway. Although they also sell these candles that have multiple wicks, that is a regular, like Shabbos candle, but it has two wicks, and you can make the bracha on that. Really, technically, you don't have to actually hold the flames together. You could just look at the candles and say B'rei Mereish. There's no reason to actually hold the candles together. It's a custom that a lot of people do, even though it's not halachically mandated to do so. Now, there's a custom of matzos mitzvah. I never did it. That you of Erev Pesach matzahs to bake matzahs mamish Erev Pesach, and the reason for that was that until a little over 100 years ago, to be honest, maybe 150 years ago, most people baked matzahs and ate them right away, and they were soft. They're allowed to be as much as a tefach thick, which is about 4 inches thick. That's a very thick loaf of bread. But the custom was to make it a ke'etzba, to make it like a thumb's breadth thick, which is still thicker than the matzahs that we have in most communities today. And the only reason why we have hard cracker matzahs, even though there's a whole thing about the matzahs getting burnt, but still doesn't mean that they have to be hard crackers. There's a Hasidic interpretation of burnt matzahs. But the only reason why we started to make hard crackers for matzah is so they should be shelf stable. Because people, in order to keep the matzahs fresh, they didn't have freezers back then. So they would just make them as thin as possible. But there's no halachic reason that they have to be hard crackers. It's just it's just a practical measure, not a halachic requirement. And so you can go to, there's a website, softmatzahs.com, and you can buy actually soft matzahs that are made with the same shmura flour, and you have it for Pesach, and the way they're sold is that they're frozen, and then you can heat them up. A lot of people think that this is only for Sephardic Jews are allowed to have these matzahs, and Ashkenazic Jews must have thin cracker matzos. But the truth of the matter is that that's not really true. You can have thicker, somewhat softer matzos on Pesach. They're not chametz. There's absolutely no reason not to eat them. And to me, as someone with more of a Hasidic approach, I am more comfortable with the soft matzahs than I am with the machine matzahs to be used on Pesach, because of the Divrei Chaim wouldn't say a reason why, and it seems like the machines at the time were different than machines now, and most likely today the machine matzahs are perfectly kosher Pesach, and like the Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld said, that they're actually more kosher because there's less of a chance to make a mistake. But you have to be an expert, and that's the one thing. I know a lot of people are saying they want to bake their own soft matzahs at home, and I would highly, highly discourage anyone from doing that. First of all, a lot of people think that they could just use regular flour, which is very problematic, because most of the flour probably is already chametz. And so the softmatzahs.com comes from a reputable Rav Machshir, who really looks at every matzah and makes sure that there's no problem with it, and it's made by Talmidei Chacham and B'nai Torah. And so there's no reason now. There's no reason to get the soft matzahs either, except for maybe to try to make karach, but it's not really gonna wrap around. It's not gonna be like a wrap. It's more like just a little. It's a thick matzah. It does break. It doesn't, But that, when we say karach, when we say, the Hillel sandwich, and everyone asks, what about the Shammai sandwich? The korach means to wrap. That we wrapped the matzah around the Korban Pesach and the maror, and now we just use it with the maror and the charosas, and we usually take two hard pieces of matzah and put them together to make the sandwich. But actually, in the old days, it could just be wrapped around, and there's really no reason to think that it has to be broken like two crackers. It's just something that people should be aware of and familiar with when it comes to matzah. And so in New Square, they actually bake the matzahs. They still make them hard, but they bake the matzahs Saturday night. So I think if you get the soft matzahs and then you put in the oven at home Saturday night, it's kind of like dealing with the matzos mitzvah in a certain sense. So just an idea that I had. Well, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you all later, and have a very happy and blessed Passover. Maybe we'll talk more about the halachas of Pesach a little later.